Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. Welcome to Hin Bus Depot and welcome to Dorm Room Self-Portraits.
That's right.
My name is Joel, and I have the pleasure of being here today with Ryan, the artist. Ryan is known by two names. Ryan Naga is on the portraits, but
That's true.
you're also known by Brian Ng.
Yes.
So
For people who knew me right before this year, my name is Ryan Ng. Recently, I'm going by Ryan Naga. My mother very briefly wanted to name me Naga before I was born. She told me this when I was 10 years old, and me at the time thought this was the coolest word ever, and I made it my first ever signature. So when I wanted to come up with an artist name to just better distinguish myself, I just decided to go by Ryan Naga. That's how I made that switch.
yeah. And Naga is also it's a hybrid being,
Yes,
right?
so Naga is a mythical creature that's half man, half serpent, and that's what really drew me to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think this idea of having two different personalities or two different sides to it is interesting. I was wondering if we could start by talking not about this show, but about your background. What happened before this show? For example, I saw your show at G Hotel in 2019.
Yes.
And that one was very different to what we see today,
Yes, it
with
was.
a range of different styles.
Mm.
Maybe you'd like to give us a bit about your background before this show.
Sure. So I'm trained in a bunch of different things. I was trained in traditional sketching. I was trained in watercolor, Chinese brush painting, Chinese calligraphy, just like a mishmash of all sorts. I did have my first solo show in G Hotel in 2019, and that was a show that I got out of pure coincidence. Really, I applied for it not knowing what it was, and then I just got a solo show, and I was just scrambling to find works and piece them together. So that was a mishmash of sketching, of oil painting, of Chinese brush painting and calligraphy. And my 2019 show would not have been possible without my teachers, Hui Xiaoping, Rosalind Teo, Dato Chong Hon Fat. Thank you guys so much. Yeah.
So, can you tell us a bit more about that show? And was there a particular style you having? It seemed to me like it was you were very young at the time. You were only 19. They reflected works from the previous few years, and it seemed like you were kind of searching for a style, experimenting.
That's true. So that was a very experimental stage of my art. My main goal for that show was to fill the walls. So anything that worked, anything that fit the theme, even vaguely, I just chuck it on. So I was experimenting with all sorts of mediums and all sorts of presentation possibilities, but definitely a little more immature at the time.
So then let's come on to this show today, which seems very different. I know it followed changes in your own life.
That's
so
true.
moving to Australia for university to Perth.
Yes.
So can you give us an idea of where the starting point of this show is?
Yeah, so this show is distinctly different from the one I had in 2019. As written on the exhibition poster, this show was the result of a particularly difficult period during quarantine. It was virtual classes, it was homesickness, it was lockdown, it was me being in a very demanding relationship at the time. And so for a period of time, I wasn't doing too good. My room was left unclean for several months. And one day I just got kind of tired of it. I just decided maybe let's make something out of this mess, you know? And I just got up, I photographed my room from various angles, and then I decided to draw them. My medium of choice was graphite because when traveling to Perth, I couldn't take my large canvases and large easels with me. So all I had was pencils, colored pencils, and a very basic watercolor palette. So it started off with the series in my room and then kind of expanded to what we have here today.
So it started with the pieces on that wall over there,
That's right.
the boxed in series.
That's right.
Yeah. Can you talk a bit more about them, about the constraints that they're showing and the different styles you're using there?
Sure. So the boxed in series was my first series that kind of started this whole show. It's things in my room. It's dirty laundry. It's empty wine bottles. It's shower slippers. It's a parcel sent to me by my parents containing snacks, containing clothes and handwritten notes, things that are very, very intimate and very, very personal. And I think that that was the first time I actually developed some sort of an attachment to what I was drawing, because I knew the subject so intimately, and I knew exactly why I was drawing them. So I think for the first time, drawing had a purpose, and drawing became something that was deeply personal and deeply meaningful.
I think what's interesting also about that series is how they're called boxed in.
Yeah,
They're
that's
about
right.
constraints being put on you, and in terms of the technical constraint you had as well, if you're using graphite only. So yeah, I think that's a really interesting place for it to start. But when I look at the rest of the show, it obviously changes. It
Yes.
opens up, and we start to move outside. We have a range of different techniques and inspirations. Yeah, maybe you could give us like a short tour of the of this show and how it changes, how it develops.
Sure. So to describe this show in maybe 2 or 3 sentences, it started off in my room, and then it branched out to places and spaces around me. So as the subject matter develops from things in my room to things outside of it, and as the locations of those subject matters becomes further and further from my room, it also meant that I was going outside more. It meant that I was creating memories for myself that were meaningful enough for me to pen down on paper. So some of it talks about family, some of it talks about myself, some friends, some previous partners, but everything is very intimately related to me and my life.
Maybe could you talk a little bit more like kind of stage by stage as it developed, because you have different series of works here. So yeah, for example, moving from the trees in the quad, going outside.
Stage by stage. So it started off with Boxed In, which was stuff in my room. And then it branched out to bus stops and transitional periods in my life. There was a period of time where I would walk around a lot at night, taking pictures of bus stops and of speeding cars in the dark. Then I was drawing things around my college. So if you can see those trees, that's trees on my college lawn. And then you've got birds outside my window. You've got beaches that I frequent. There is a lotus pond from my childhood home that my dad, yeah, dad loves gardening.
So why were you picking these particular subjects to draw? Do they represent different things? Could you tell us? You talked me through the exhibition. You told me some of the really lovely stories behind some of them. Maybe you could tell some of those stories.
So should we start talking about the main piece?
Yeah.
The Dormer Self-Portrait?
Yeah. Okay. Let's start with that one.
So the main piece of this exhibition is titled Dorm Room Self-Portrait, and hence that was the guiding theme behind all of these drawings. So that was initially done for the Lester Prize, a very prestigious portraiture competition in Perth, Western Australia. I initially took a picture of my face, I traced it, and then I doodled different things in my room to construct different parts of it. And then I took individual pictures of those items, pieced them together digitally, and then projected them on the wall, and then went in with pencil. So this entire process took anywhere between 100 to 150 hours. But the funny thing about that piece is that when I was halfway done, right, so that was done for a prize, but I was halfway done, and at this point, I was 60 to 70 hours in. I realized that I couldn't enter it because I wasn't a citizen. And I was so upset. And then I actually called the prize, not out of anger, but just because I was upset. And I said, oh man, I've spent so much time on this. And is there anything you can do about it? Is there any other prize that I could enter instead? Like, just give me something, please. And I was whining for 10 minutes, maybe. It turns out I was whining to the CEO of the competition, who later got me on board as a volunteer and said the most heartwarming things to me. I actually sent her an email 2 days ago, just thanking her for that. But anyway, that piece is a self-portrait in more ways than one. There is a heel balm because my heels crack during the winter. There is my Birkenstocks, which is the reason for my heels cracking during the winter. There is my face lotion. There's a knife I stole from the dining hall. There's a hair dryer that I borrowed from my brother for 9 months and never told him. So it's not just my likeness. It is things that make up my life and things that make up me as a person. Uh,
So there's also very obviously a Malaysian passport.
there's a Malaysian
as
passport
the
as
center
at
of
my
the-
eye. Yes.
Yeah. So was that an element in this? Obviously, you're a Malaysian artist, a Penang
That's true.
artist, but you're in a foreign environment at that time,
Yes.
Australian environment. So, yeah, was there any difficulty there? Any clash or conflict or?
Yeah,
difficulty?
of course. So it was a little difficult initially searching for opportunities in Western Australia because of my citizenship status. It meant that I wasn't eligible for half of the awards and grants and residencies available. And from the remaining half, I was either not good enough for them or I wasn't, or it just didn't fit my practice, you know? So that meant that the amount of things that I could apply for became very, very limited. Being an artist in Penang was a lot easier. I'd say comparatively a lot easier because all I did was make art, exhibit art, and bam, I'm an artist. I'm a working artist. But in Australia, there were higher barriers to entry, so I had to really find my way through. And it was very difficult to find opportunities because there isn't a website or a directory that compiles them all neatly for you. And there's also the problem of once you've found something, how do you apply for it?
Yeah.
You know, these are questions I never had to answer back in Penang. It's how do you describe your practice in 750 words? How does culture, place, and space, how do you link all of that to your practice? What room is there for community engagement? How open are you to cross media collaborations? It's all of these considerations that you really have to think about. And I think that when thinking about how to market myself, I also had to think about what I liked about my practice and what about my art is important to me. You know, I think that, and so from that process, it was also a bit of a journey of learning about myself a little more as well.
Yeah, it's interesting to have that very practical kind of marketing side, which you don't always think about with art. So how did well, from there, let's lead on to another piece in that corner, which is Hotel Flowers.
Yes.
And this also represents a kind of new stage according to what you told me, a new stage in this journey.
Yeah.
So yeah, why would you say that?
So Hotel Flowers, as Joel talked about, so Hotel Flowers was just a very simple piece done during my first art opportunity in Western Australia. I was an artist in residence in Karratha, which was a mining town in northern WA, so which is very close to the desert area. I had initially prepared a bunch of reference photos for the residency, but then that was when I realized that I'd like to do something inspired by the place. So very simply, I just took a photo of the first bunch of flowers I saw outside my hotel. I was in my studio, I looked at it, and I just decided to draw it out. Just pretty straightforward. But the reason why that was a meaningful piece to me was because that was the first time I was properly recognized as a Western Australian artist. So during that residency that lasted 2 weeks, I gave an artist talk at the Red Earth Arts Precinct, which is the largest gallery in the area. And I said that what makes me the proudest of this achievement isn't because of the scale of the festival. It's not because of how much I was paid to come here. It's because that someone looked at my CV and my bio and my works and my mini essays and thought that I was good enough. I think it's these little moments of recognition that's very, very important in an artistic career, as it's often pretty isolating.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that definitely marked a bit of a transitional period in my career.
Yeah. I'm definitely at that time immediately coming out of the pandemic
For sure.
and lockdown.
Yeah.
And there was around that stage you also started doing a series of residencies, which took you away from Perth as well.
That's true. So since then, so during that stage of my life, this was maybe March 2022. Not only was I improving artistically, but I was also getting a little better at marketing myself and presenting myself through written form. I'm very blessed to have received a bunch of residencies since then. I was an artist in residence at the Red Earth Arts Festival. I did a residency with Cool Change Contemporary, which is a contemporary arts organization in Perth. My residencies took me to Yandayara, which was also northern WA, where I lived in an Australian Aboriginal community for 2 weeks. So I lived in a school. I was doing daily workshops with children, and it was just fantastic.
Yeah. Sorry. Could you tell us a bit more about that? About working with the children there?
Yeah. So I'm not a morning person by any means. Like I wake up at maybe 11, 12 every day, but every single day I was there. I was up bright and early, 7 a.m. without even having set an alarm. Every time I go into the schools, I would be greeted by 5 to 10 different kids just running at me, giving me hugs, giving me high fives. I had a child who learned how to read his first words during my time in the residency, and as soon as he did that, I was the first person he wanted to share that with. And it was just crazy. They were teaching me how to play basketball. They were teaching me games that they invented. And on my last day, a child came up to me and said, "Ryan, do you like it here? Are you having fun here?" I said yes, and she says, "If you like it here, then why are you leaving?" What a smart little child.
Yeah.
I'm so very grateful that artists really taken me out of my comfort zone and taken me out of my daily routine to experience life in very different forms. Very, very enriching experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you were talking just now about the importance of receiving support and recognition from elsewhere. But in that situation, you became the one kind of giving support and recognition too.
I'd hope so. I think I've received so much. It's time I give back just a little bit.
Yeah. Should we move on to another piece, which is
Sure.
the piece behind us?
Of course. Okay, so this piece, as everyone can see, is titled "It's a Miracle We Ever Met." So I started drawing pigeons because a close friend of mine once told me I looked like a pigeon because I walk funny and eat garbage. And every time we'd hang out, she'd point out pigeons and we'd discuss what they were doing. And every time, even when I'm alone, I'd look at pigeons with garbage in their mouths and I'd go, me too. And then, so I started drawing pigeons as me and my mates. And this drawing that's almost 2.5 meters long is representative of 3 years of hellos and goodbyes. You don't know when a pigeon flock gathers. You don't know where they come from. Some might come alone, some might come with friends, some leave early, some leave with friends. All you know is that they're here and they're eating. And maybe it doesn't matter where they go next or when they leave. This was done before I left Perth, after a series of goodbyes with friends and other connections that I made there.
Yeah, so it's about goodbyes, but it's also about connections, about
Yes,
encounters,
100%.
about opportunities. How about from a technical level? Because it's a big piece. I'm sure it was
It is a
difficult
huge piece.
to compose and to plan out.
Yeah, so this was done during another residency that I had as well. It was initially planned for a 4-panel drawing only. But then I asked the other artist, I was like, does this feel a little bit cramped to you? So 4 panels became 6 panels, became 8 panels. And it was crazy because I didn't have enough reference photos. Like I didn't have enough pigeons to fill the pages. So I ended up having to piece together pigeons from a bunch of different reference photos. So it was a lot of drawing and taking a step back and drawing and taking a step back until I eventually filled 2 meters of paper. And it was a bit of a challenge in itself.
Amazing. So I like that as a way to think about this show, about different encounters and the different things which different people different opportunities have brought to you during this time.
Yes.
So looking around the show, we've got 3 years of work and 3 years also of growth and change and development.
Of course.
How would you characterize, looking back on that time, how would you describe how it's changed, say on a technical level, a personal level?
Yeah, so comparing now with 3 years ago, yes.
Yeah.
I think that the main difference is 3 years ago, during my show in G Hotel, I was searching for inspiration very externally. Every day I wanted to become a different artist. Someday, so initially it was the ink drawings of Kirby Rosales, a Filipino illustrator. Then it was Chung Kia Kien, of a Penang artist. Then it was just any other random artist that I'd find online that I'd want to emulate, and I realized that I wanted to become them so badly that I forgot to become myself. As cliche as that sounds, I think that surrounded by good artists is both a blessing and a curse. I think the good news is you improve really quickly. But the bad thing is that once you have this gold standard of what is good art and what is high quality art, you forget to think about things outside of that. Think about possibilities that could better suit you. And I think that being away from Penang for 3 years has really pushed me to spend time alone. And I think that did wonders for my artistic practice and especially through those various applications that I had to fill out. I started thinking about myself in a more critical sense, not just what makes me happy, what makes me sad, but what makes me feel safe, what makes me feel nostalgic, what makes me feel remorse, what has impacted me, and how can I represent all of these abstract emotions in a static visual image. And I think that while I might not have a very strong artistic voice just yet, and while I might not have a very clear sense of who I am and what I want to do, I think I'm finally starting to have a better idea.
So how would you describe yourself now? What do you think of the things which are motivating you now? Now you've had these years of growth to understand your own motivations more. What are the things which motivate you, which you're trying to express?
I don't know. Whenever I finish a drawing, I don't really plan out what's next. It's just that I think taking day-to-day life seriously is a very good way of improving as an artist. I think just constantly keeping an open mind, keeping a lookout for new inspirations and new reasons to make art. Maybe today I'm having a chat with my parents and they say something that reminds me of my childhood, and I might think, okay, that's a pretty good idea, and then maybe I could go back to my old house, childhood home, and search for more inspirations there. But it's never really planned out, and I think that's what I like about it. I've heard this saying that art is the process of seeing yourself in things that are not you, and I think that that's the fun part of it. Anything can become a drawing, anything can become an idea, as long as you put a bit of thought to it.
When we were talking earlier, you mentioned about nostalgia
Right.
being one of these drivers for you, which is interesting because you're a relatively young man, and so the idea of looking backwards to when you were a child is really interesting. Maybe you could talk a bit more about the piece at your old house in Sungai Petani.
Yeah,
So we'll
okay,
give a bit of idea of
No worries.
sense of looking back.
On the topic of nostalgia, yes. So there are two pieces. One of them would be Fragile Surface, which is the lotus pond done of my childhood home. The other one would be the Green Grape Bundle, and both of them relate to my parents in different way. So the lotus pond is one from my childhood home. I was very young at the time, and I would struggle to look inside of it. I visited that house again very recently, and I realized that the pond isn't so tall after all. Everything in that house seemed a lot shorter than I remember it. And I think that that's growth, that's growing up. And the garden is my father's pride and joy. He loves gardening. He manages everything from the lotuses to the koi to the vines to the bonsais and all of that. So that drawing itself, it's childhood, it's nostalgia, it's growing up, it's my dad. It's my house. It's me. Another one would be the grapes. That piece was completely unplanned. I was traveling alone for the first time, right? The first thing I did was stock my fridge with green grapes. And I was wondering, and something about that action made me feel a sense of comfort. And I was like, why is that? And then I realized that growing up, every time I travel with my family, they stock our fridge with grapes. When asked why, they said grapes have more fiber and they're easier to eat. So you have to eat them every time we travel. So I was like, wow, this is a pretty interesting theme. And sure enough, after COVID, once they visited, they bought grapes again. So I was thinking, wow, what an interesting way of showing affection, of receiving care from my parents and eventually caring for myself in that same way. So what a nice little, it's a full circle.
Yeah.
Full circle.
Exactly, like a moment of personal growth as
Yes.
well, development.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing. The thing which really strikes me looking through this show is that it's showing you changing,
It is.
and it's showing you being quite aware of this process and working through it in your work as well.
Yes, that's right.
Can I ask a question about your technique? So you said that at the beginning you had to use graphite
That's
because you had no other choice. You couldn't bring any of your more bulky materials with you.
That's right.
So have you found that that's worked for you?
Yeah, I'd say it's worked pretty well, considering I'm having a solo show about it. I started with very basic pencil and paper, but then I started I started experimenting with different presentation possibilities that graphite can potentially achieve. I'm working with blending stumps. I'm working with graphite powder. Sometimes I'm working with soluble graphite. I'm working with mechanical erasers and electric erasers to create lines of different qualities. I've mixed graphite with sand before. I've mixed graphite with linseed oil for oil painting before, and just a series of experiments, trials and errors.
But it's really interesting the kind of range of different expressions you get, because you have some which more like ink washes. You have some very precise, detailed work as well. So yeah, I think there's an amazing range you can have of expression.
For sure. Yeah.
So you describe yourself as a Penang artist. These works were produced in Australia mainly.
Yes.
But now you're back in Penang, and
That's right.
how do you think being part of the Penang scene has impacted your practice?
So I don't know if I would call myself a Penang artist. Quite frankly, I don't know what I'd call myself at all. But all I know is that without Penang, I wouldn't be the person that I am today, or I probably wouldn't even be an artist at all. I think Penang has shown me so much kindness, so much warmth. It's been so welcoming, and I just really quickly just got into the scene, and no one was ever hesitant in giving me any form of support in any form. Previously in this interview, I talked a bit about being seen and how that is really important to an artist in their artistic career. And I've had several moments like this with other Penang artists when I was abroad and when I needed support as well. At some point, I had an exhibition in the Penang State Art Gallery. Ivan called me at the time, telling me that my work had 5 different buyers and telling me things that he noticed about my techniques and things he'd appreciate about my work. I wasn't feeling very good at that time, but that call made me feel so much better. Lucy, an artist that I've known for 5 years, I was calling her, telling her I was feeling hesitant in applying for things, and she asked me why I was afraid. She told me that that's not the rhyme she once knew. Datuk Chong Hon Fat has said so many nice things about me to my mother. Also, once I called my teacher, Rosalind Teo, I told her I'm tired. I told her I'm tired of searching and I'm tired of trying new things. And she told me she understands because she's been in the same position. So I think that while this period might be isolating at some points, Penang has been so kind to me, and I've received so much from this place and from the people around here, and I hope to give back as soon as I can.
thank you so much for giving us this this retrospective of how you've changed over these last few years. So I guess my last question would be, where do you go next? What's next for you? I know that you didn't study art, so you studied.
I didn't study art. I double majored in finance and economics at the University of Western Australia. As to what's next, that is a fantastic question that I don't have the answer for. Every time I've told Joel, every time I have a conversation with someone that's over 5 minutes, I ask them this question: are you hiring? Because at this point, I'm open to anything. I'm open to where life takes me, and I know art will always be a constant, but I'd like something on the side, I have a bunch of interests that I'd like to further explore as well.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you being so, well, I really liked this, but it's such personal stories you're telling. It's not just about the work or the technique, but also very much about your own personal story and your own personal growth.
Thank you so much.
So thank you so much for sharing that with us. Yeah. Let me thank everyone else here for being present, for being so attentive, for your support, and yeah, I'm very grateful for all of you being here. Thank you. Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.